Drive down any highway in the United States, and the religious architecture projects an illusion of absolute permanence. From the sprawling campus-style megachurches of the Sun Belt to the towering stained-glass cathedrals of the Northeast, these structures dominate the landscape. The parking lots fill, the digital screens project a comforting narrative of continuity, and the institutions appear unshakable. But behind the stage lighting and the polished exteriors, a deeply ominous reality is materializing. According to projections cited by the National Council of Churches, up to 100,000 congregations in the United States are on track to close their doors in the coming years. That is 1/4 of all operational houses of worship in the nation. This is not a shift in cultural mood or a temporary dip in attendance. It is an inescapable, unforgiving mathematical autopsy. The timeline for this collapse is not a distant theoretical future. Tom Rainer, a prominent researcher and former CEO of Lifeway, projected an unprecedented anomaly of delayed institutional collapse, 15,000 churches ceasing to exist in the span of a single year. Political scientist Ryan Burge has calculated that nearly 1/3 of the country's 350,000 Christian congregations are currently hovering on the absolute brink of extinction. Understanding why tens of thousands of these massive facilities will inevitably go bankrupt by 2030 requires examining the exact capital that keeps their lights on. The foundation of this vast ecosystem is not made of stone. It is made of demographics. Comprehending the scale of the impending fracture requires looking at the actuarial tables. The financial engine of the traditional church model was built by, and entirely relies upon, the baby boomer generation. Born between 1946 and 1964, this cohort views institutional loyalty and systematic financial giving not as a choice, but as an inherent duty. Today, baby boomers account for approximately 40 to 42% of the giving population within the church. But when financial consultants analyze the internal ledgers of individual congregations, the dependency becomes staggering. In many established churches, over 70% of total contributions originate from members aged 55 and older. In increasingly common scenarios, age-based reviews reveal that nearly 90% of a church's capital is supplied by individuals over the age of 60. The systemic fragility is absolute. The financial consulting firm Emmaus Partners explicitly warns of a giving cliff, noting that in some parishes, over 30% of annual contributions are currently supplied by the silent generation, donors whose average ages are in their mid to late 80s. Across the broader spectrum of charitable giving, industry data reveals that a mere 15% of a church's donor base contributes a staggering 50% of all financial donations. The minority holds the majority. The entire operational structure balances on the checkbooks of a rapidly aging demographic. And that demographic is dying. According to data from the U.S. Census Bureau, the mortality rate of the aging population is accelerating. Currently, over 7,000 baby boomer funerals take place every single day. As this generation advances into older age, the mortality curve will steepen violently. The U.S. Census Bureau projects that by the year 2037, the number of annual deaths in the United States will reach approximately 3.6 million. That is an increase of 1 million annual deaths compared to 2015. Within just 12 years, the volume of boomer funerals will approach 11,000 per day. This is the silent ticker running in the background of every church budget meeting. Every time a faithful 75-year-old congregant passes away, a pillar of the institution's financial foundation disappears overnight. There is a pervasive illusion among institutional leadership that the younger generations stepping into the pews will eventually adopt the same financial habits as their predecessors. The data tells a highly disruptive story. Younger generations are not withholding their capital. They are actively redirecting it. A report published by the Barna Group captured this behavioral divergence perfectly. The data revealed that while 7% of elders over the age of 70 donate 10% or more of their income to a church general fund, only 1% of millennials claim to do the same. When asked about ultimate financial goals, a mere 10% of millennials stated that serving God with their money was a primary objective. Furthermore, only 13% of millennials believe that giving financially is the most generous action a person can take, compared to 29% of elders who hold that traditional view. The definition of generosity has been completely rewritten. A comprehensive 10-year sociological study known as the Millennial Impact Report unmasked this pivot. Millennials prioritize issues and people over institutions. When propelled into action, they are compelled to give back to specific, transparent causes, not to a faceless general operating fund. They demand to know exactly how their money translates into tangible results. This demand for direct impact has triggered a massive capital flight away from the traditional church model. According to a Giving by Generation report from Giving USA and the fundraising firm Dunham & Company, millennial households are highly philanthropic. In 2022, they gave 40% more to charity on average than they did in 2016, growing their annual contributions to over $1,300 and officially surpassing Generation X in household giving. However, the destination of those funds shifted radically. Over that exact same period, millennial giving strictly to places of worship fell by 31%. Simultaneously, millennial financial support for specific faith-based aid organizations, operations like Compassion International or World Vision, surged by an astonishing 130%. The capital is moving from the collection plate to the campaign contribution. If a millennial sees a transparent relief effort, they will fund it instantly. But they will not blindly drop 10% of their paycheck into a wooden box to pay for an institution's utility bills. We are watching two converging vectors: the literal death of the institutional donor base and the redirection of capital by the ascending generations. When these vectors collide with the fixed economic realities of operating a physical church, the outcome is systemic insolvency. The modern American church is burdened by a vast aging infrastructure. It costs an estimated $7 to $10 per square foot annually just to keep a facility running. For a modest 10,000 square foot property, that equates to a baseline tab of up to $100,000 for utilities, insurance, and basic maintenance. Many religious leaders privately concede that their institutions are only one major infrastructure failure, a collapsed roof or a broken boiler, away from total bankruptcy. Beyond the brick and mortar, there is the human cost. Personnel salaries and benefits routinely consume between 50 and 60% of a congregation's entire operating budget. In heavily leveraged scenarios, experts note that staffing and debt combinations can rise as high as 65% of total income. This creates a rigid, inescapable overhead. The building demands heat, the staff demands salaries, the bank demands the mortgage payment, but the revenue stream is actively bleeding out. A recent report by the Unstuck Group quantified the exact conversion rate of this generational shift, and the metric is devastating. Due to differences in income levels, accumulated wealth, and fundamentally different philosophies of giving, it currently takes the combined financial contributions of 10 Generation Z attendees to replace the giving power of one retiring baby boomer, 10 to 1. Even if a church miraculously succeeds in attracting a massive influx of young adults to fill the empty pews, the ledger cannot be balanced. The younger crowds may be present, and they are volunteering at incredibly high rates, with 54% of Generation Z reporting they have volunteered for a charity in the past 3 months. But they are not funding the institution. A commercial mortgage cannot be paid with volunteer hours. A pastor's salary cannot be paid with good intentions. The capital reserves are draining, the fixed costs are rising, and the generational replacement rate is economically unviable. What is being witnessed is the permanent unwinding of a century-old business model. The traditional church relied on a localized monopoly of community and a deeply ingrained culture of percentage-based tithing. That ecosystem has been obliterated. Younger generations are highly connected, entirely secularized in their financial behaviors, and deeply skeptical of bureaucratic overhead. They investigate charities online and scrutinize every dollar. Having watched established institutions become mired in moral failings, political agendas, and bloated executive salaries, nearly 1 in 5 millennials and Generation Z adults now report they do not trust religious organizations at all with their financial support. When the underlying trust is fractured, the capital simply flows elsewhere. The church is no longer the default broker for human generosity. As the 2020s progress, the friction between this behavioral reality and the physical institutional framework will generate a massive wave of structural failures. The National Council of Churches' projection of 100,000 closed doors will manifest not as a sudden explosion, but as a slow, quiet strangulation. It will happen in boardrooms where a median congregational income of $120,000 can no longer cover the insurance premiums. The American landscape is standing on the precipice of a vast liminal void. Over the next 10 years, communities will be transformed by the creation of spiritual brownfields, tens of thousands of vacant architectures, massive empty sanctuaries, and silent bell towers standing as monuments to a bygone demographic. The 2030 Tithing Cliff is not a prophecy. It is a mathematical certainty written in the actuarial tables and the shifting behavioral data of the modern masses. The financial architects of the modern church are passing away, and with them goes the institutional loyalty that kept the lights on. As the capital dries up and these properties are quietly liquidated into retail spaces and mixed-use developments, we are left to observe the unmasking of a systemic collapse. When the financial foundation of the modern institution disappears overnight, what exactly remains? Will the faith adapt to the cause-based, decentralized demands of the future, or will it simply echo inside the vast, empty halls of a bankrupt system? The data offers no comfort, only the cold, unyielding reality of the ledger.